Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to His Excellency Mr. Shinzo Abe, Prime Minister of Japan, and our Deputy Prime Minister, Mr. Tharman Shanmugaratnam. Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and a very warm welcome to the 33rd Singapore Lecture. The Institute of Southeast Asian Studies is privileged to host the 33rd Singapore Lecture to be delivered by His Excellency Mr. Shinzo Abe, Prime Minister of Japan. I now have the pleasure of calling upon Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Finance, Mr. Tharman Shanmugaratnam, to deliver his opening remarks, introduce the Prime Minister, and chair the proceedings.
His Excellency Shinzo Abe, Prime Minister of Japan, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is with great pleasure that I welcome all of you to the 33rd Singapore Lecture. We are honored to have with us this afternoon the Prime Minister of Japan, His Excellency Shinzo Abe. To Prime Minister Abe, thank you for agreeing to deliver the Singapore Lecture during what I know is a very short and busy trip to Singapore. Singapore and Japan share a warm and comprehensive relationship, characterized by deep economic ties and wide-ranging cooperation in areas such as health, the environment, and cultural exchanges. Prime Minister Abe himself has played an important role in advancing these relations. In 2007, together with Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong, he mooted the idea of setting up a Japan Creative Center, or JCC, in Singapore to promote Japan's cutting-edge technologies as well as Japanese art and culture. The first of its kind outside of Japan, the JCC has become an enduring symbol of the long-standing ties between our countries. Prime Minister Abe's bilateral visit to Singapore today follows from Prime Minister Lee's visit to Japan in May. It also marks Prime Minister Abe's third visit to Southeast Asia after taking office in December last year, a clear reflection of the importance he places on building relations with the region. Since his re-election to the premiership, Prime Minister Abe has prioritized Japan's economic recovery and diplomacy in the regional and global arenas. He has rolled out a series of bold macroeconomic policies and reforms aimed at revitalizing the Japanese economy. Collectively dubbed Abenomics, these policies will be the focus of today's Singapore lecture. Prime Minister Abe was known to be a skilled archery exponent in his college days. It is therefore no coincidence that the combination of monetary policy, fiscal policy, and structural reform or growth initiatives that comprise the new approach in Japan's economic strategies is referred to as the 3 arrows of Abenomics. Singapore and the rest of the world watches the flight of the 3 arrows, and especially the progress of the 3rd arrow of structural reforms, with great interest. Prime Minister Abe's policy moves come at a crucial juncture, with the advanced economies still emerging from the throes of a deep recession and deep financial crisis. Asia, too, is seeing increased uncertainties, although it remains the largest source of growth in the world economy. Asia's growth will be more resilient and confidence in the region stronger with an economically vibrant Japan. There indeed remains a strong complementarity between economic prospects in Japan and ASEAN. Success in Abenomics will provide a boost to the ASEAN economies through greater trade and investment. In turn, Japan's re-engagement of the region is expected to add strength to its own economic recovery. While Japan faces challenges, we should not forget that Japan is still a fount of new technologies and culture, reflecting deep and fundamental strengths. These are strengths that Singapore and the region have benefited from over the last few decades and have more to learn from. As Prime Minister Abe said earlier this year, he is back, and so is Japan. We look forward to Japan's important contribution to the prosperity and stability of the region under Prime Minister Abe's leadership. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I now invite Prime Minister Shinzo Abe to deliver the 33rd Singapore Lecture. Thank you.
Deputy Prime Minister, Deputy Chairman Wong Along, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I am very grateful to have been invited to deliver this Singapore lecture. I would also like to express my sincere appreciation to everyone at the Institute of Southeast Asian Studies for affording me this opportunity. I consider myself to have been presented with a very timely opportunity today in 2 or 3 senses. 5 days ago on Sunday, Japan held an election to select half of the members of our House of Councillors. Today is my first opportunity since the election to deliver a structured talk on Japanese economy and various other issues. Most importantly of all, the will to change has returned to Japan, and so has strength. The revolving door politics with its high turnover, for which Japan is now known, has disappeared and is now a thing of the past. The second sense in which today's address is timely is that 3 days ago, Japan made its debut in the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement process, joining the negotiations underway in Malaysia, your neighbor. I am intent on Japan expanding the potential of the economy of the Asia-Pacific region further, together with the United States and other member countries in the negotiations. The third reason is that this year marks exactly the 40th year of ASEAN-Japan relations. To commemorate this, Japan has invited the ASEAN heads of state and government to Japan in December, when we will hold a special summit. Today is therefore a truly ideal opportunity to consider the future of ASEAN-Japan relations. In the House of Councillors election 5 days ago, our party was granted a strong mandate from the Japanese people, a rare occurrence in recent years. The ruling coalition has now successfully attained a majority in both the House of Representatives and the House of Councillors. Over the past few years, an anemic economy in Japan has engendered feeble politics, which in turn weakens the economy further. We have been experiencing a negative chain of weakening that extends to our diplomacy and national security. Ongoing deflation has made people gloomy in their outlook and inward-focused right to their core. In order to overturn this situation, we needed immediately and simultaneously to strengthen the economy while working towards greater stability and robustness politically. I believe that through the recent election, at a minimum, we were able to achieve stability in politics. That said, we have still done nothing more than head to our starting point. In the third quarter of 2012, far from expanding, the Japanese economy instead contracted at an annualized rate of minus 3.6%. Yet the Japanese economy grew at an annualized rate of 4.1% in the first quarter of this year under my economic policy. If the Japanese economy were to continue to grow at this pace for a year, it would be equivalent to the new emergence of an economy the size of Israel's. Japan has lost as much as $500 billion in gross national income during the deflationary period of the last few years. This is the same as a country the size of Norway simply disappearing from the face of the earth. Needless to say, our tax base has shrunk accordingly, and we have become unable to maintain our public finances without relying on government bonds. Now, you can see the picture. Without growth, there can be no fiscal reconstruction. Without growth, we can neither maintain nor enhance our social security system. And without growth, a strengthening of our diplomacy or national security will also be simply impossible. I trust that from this, the situation has become clear to you. All of these are predicated on economic growth. Borrowing a phrase from the late Margaret Thatcher, I have said that these are cases of TINA. There is no alternative. Moreover, a technology and knowledge-intensive economy like Japan's cannot enhance its productivity unless it takes advantage of innovation. What we need is the bold reform of our regulatory regime. This will serve as an external catalyst, much like the TPP negotiations. It will create new added value through dynamic competition and cooperation, which will extend beyond national borders to straddle the entire economic area. Achieving this will require robust political power that takes on vested interests. I feel that through this recent election, we now, at long last, hold in our hands the trigger for pointing both politics and the economy towards a better and then still better direction. All that remains for us is the execution of these plans. We have now reached a state of TINA. Truly, there is no alternative. Since I achieved my comeback as Prime Minister at the end of last year, I have been promoting policies known as my 3 arrows to put the Japanese economy on a growth track once more. These 3 arrows are specifically monetary policy, fiscal policy, and a strategy for growth. From now on, we will be engaged in firing off the 3rd arrow in particular. Implementing reforms will be the first and foremost political issue for us to tackle starting this autumn. We need to fortify the Japanese economy in substantial ways and increase real income. At the same time, we must put public finances on a sustainable course. We must not lose our momentum. We will take a decision immediately this autumn on investment tax credits that will strongly incentivize companies. I will convene an extraordinary session of the Diet aiming to enact in rapid-fire succession laws necessary for regulatory reform, laws to facilitate corporate restructuring, and more. In the months and years to come, Japan will transform into a more open economy. We will become an economy that applauds and assists those entrepreneurs that rise to their feet over and over again, using their business failures as nourishment, strengthening them for future endeavors. It will be an economy in which those who actively take on challenges will be rewarded. We will become an economy that stimulates innovation in order to cultivate Japan's technologies still further, from basic science to medical care and agricultural technologies. Openness to other countries, challenges, actively taking on challenges, and innovation are the key concepts that will guide our reforms at all times. In order to break through the regulatory regime that has already petrified solid, much like bedrock, we need both a powerful drill and a sturdy drill bit. In a speech I delivered in London recently, I said that I myself intended to become that sturdy drill bit. I will restate here the same point I made then. We will advance regulatory reforms in the fields of electricity, agriculture, and medical services while promoting new services and new industries. From there, we will elicit the vitality of the Japanese economy. I will also push forward with special zones that will serve as showcases for regulatory reforms, capitalizing on indomitable political power to establish national strategic special zones, whose progress I myself will supervise as Prime Minister. This summer, Japanese tourist sites are bustling with visitors from around Asia. We expect the number of visitors to increase to a degree never seen before. Going forward, we will also work together with non-Japanese entities to improve our infrastructure to enable foreign visitors to enjoy Japanese tourist sites. We've been saying for some time that we want to be the most business-friendly country in the world. I wholeheartedly hope for Japan to catch up to Singapore in this regard, and if possible, even overtake Singapore. To those in the audience today, let me say that Japan avidly welcomes your investment. I call this Invest in Japan, or double IJ. Feel free to repeat it. It rolls off the tongue. Invest in Japan, double IJ. Some say that Shinzo Abe will ultimately be defeated if he takes on the vested interests surrounding agriculture and medical services. However, they are wrong in presupposing that there will be little growth in those sectors, and as a result, the distribution of income should remain zero-sum. But my view is that we could always seek positive-sum paths for industries such as agriculture and medical services. We should bring forth new markets and services through innovation and provide growth opportunities. The Yumechikara type of wheat flour is just one recent example in which innovation has emerged in agriculture. Although we in Japan consume a considerable amount of bread, until now we were unable to produce flour suited for making bread from domestically grown wheat. But recently we succeeded in making a variety that yields suitable flour using wheat grown in Hokkaido at the northern tip of the Japanese archipelago. The direct translation of the Yumechikara brand name is the power of dreams. This is the same phrase used by Honda Motor in its advertisements worldwide, but this is just a coincidence. This wheat flour will make it possible for us to compete evenly matched with high-quality imported goods. Moreover, by stimulating innovation and seeking markets outside Japan, even agriculture will become an industry that can go forward successfully under this positive-sum approach, as already happens with our fruit and with Wagyu, i.e. Japanese beef. A similar statement can be made about medical services. We will sell our knowledge in hospital operation and management and in medical insurance to emerging countries in package form. The government and the private sector will act in cooperation with each other to achieve this. We aim to start this type of endeavor in the immediate future with an eye on the countries of Southeast Asia. I have visited 13 countries in half a year since I assumed office as Prime Minister. Wherever I went, I learned that there is a great deal of demand for Japan's agricultural products and Japan's medical treatment services. I discovered this in Moscow and found the same thing to be true in Abu Dhabi as well. All of this is untapped demand. I myself am spearheading the efforts we recently launched to uncover this limitless latent demand. A task assigned to me and to my administration is to implement these things step by step and point by point. ASEAN will play an enormously important role for the Japanese economy within that context. Over the past decade, the value of Japanese exports to ASEAN has jumped 2.3 times, while the value of imports from ASEAN into Japan has risen to 2.5 times the previous amount. A look at trends over the past decade shows us that we have run a balanced trade with each other. If you plot our trade figures on a graph, you will find that they track each other almost exactly in superb fashion. An expanding Japan is in the best interest of ASEAN. A growing ASEAN is in the best interest of Japan. Between Japan and ASEAN, we find a state of affairs that affords us the ability to say such things with certainty. I believe that the effects of the 3 arrows that I have fired will, and indeed must, extend not only to Japan, but also to ASEAN. ASEAN will be the 21st century's champion in fostering the vast middle-class consumer markets. The land, sea, and air infrastructure now being extensively constructed, including through cooperation with Japan, and the connectivity that will intensify as a result, will cause ASEAN's economies of scale to come into full bloom. Asia has an enormous demand for infrastructure to connect East and West, with ASEAN at the very heart. I would like for Japan's system technology to be used extensively towards improving the Asian region's infrastructure, which will require an investment of some $8 trillion by 2020. Singapore boasts an impressive infrastructure industry and the project creativity and management technology of Temasek and Ascendas. If we can bring these together with the system technology of Japan's corporations, it would become the strongest tag team in the world for building dream cities, would it not? Let's do it. Let's embark on making that a reality. Japan, which has a long history of direct investment, is a resident in ASEAN from way back. Take, if you will, the enormous economic area that is about to come into being through the confluence of the 2 seas, stretching from the Pacific Ocean to the Indian Ocean. If we were to liken that economic area to an airplane, Japan and ASEAN would be like 2 engines attached to the right and left wings. There is no question that we will be able to fly high into the sky. 40 years ago, in many countries of the region, the building of state was viewed as an endless string of thorny challenges. We in Japan have observed closely as ASEAN countries made progress from that era until the present day, including the changes that have taken place in Myanmar in recent years. Tomorrow in Manila, I will offer flowers at the memorial to Jose Rizal, the hero of Philippine modernization. Jose Rizal left us the following words: "Without education and liberty, which are the soil and the sun of man, no reform is possible." The Asia manifested in ASEAN is the Asia that tirelessly moved forward, taking Rizal's words as its motto. It was precisely by placing value on education and freedom that you have come so far down this long path. Am I correct here? We Japanese are proud to have always proceeded together with that kind of ASEAN, even during the era of the currency crisis that was so severely trying. I think that you yourselves will testify eloquently to what kind of country Japan was during this time. You, who have been involved with Japan for such a long time, are fully aware of the national character of Japan, which embraces the importance of freedom and peace, and never shooting even a single bullet, has never wavered from democracy or the rule of law. In recent years, Singapore and Japan have incorporated India, a great democratic power, into the grand tapestry of the East Asia Summit, and together have attained the tremendous achievement of bringing about a confluence of the Pacific and Indian Oceans. I am delighted that ASEAN and Japan have gone beyond their economic relations to forge a relationship that takes on responsibility for the security of the region, particularly freedom of navigation on the seas. Japan and ASEAN hold in common a highly developed civil society and an urban culture. We should commend the fact that our relations have progressed to the point where each of us inspires the other in cultural aspects. My administration is currently working out a plan to be announced in concert with the commemorative summit at year's end to enhance the richness of Asian culture even more. I hope you will look forward to this. Now, ASEAN and Japan are unfailingly in tandem, not only in economic but also in cultural terms. Ours is a relationship in which we stride forward together. In times both past and present and also into the future, what has guided Asia is not coercion through force. What has linked Asia together is the winds sweeping across the seas. It has been maritime trade transported by the wind. It has been the blessings of the seas. What's being cultivated is a spirit in which we hold the forces of nature in awe. And yet, at the same time, we are optimistic to the core, believing that the fierce forces of nature will at some point transform into benign gusts of wind. What guides this kind of Asia is not coercive force. Rather, it is the interchange that takes place in a spirit of mutual respect and of learning from one another. It is the interchange that transpires in the spirit of being lively, warm-hearted, and at ease, in which we want to enjoy light-hearted moments with each other and even sing songs together. I am not saying that because Japan is the country that gave the world the magnificent invention of karaoke. And I am looking forward to the day when I can have amicable discussions with the leaders of China, an important neighboring country for Japan, in exactly this spirit of being at ease with each other. As we consider where we have been and where we are going in terms of our relations with the Republic of Korea, we have a relationship in which both Japan and the ROK are allies with the United States and form a foundation for regional security. In light of this, we are reconfirming our view that here too we are in tandem with the ROK, both economically and culturally. Given this, I sincerely hope for us to hold candid discussions at the leaders' level or at the foreign ministers' level. I hold in mind a certain image of how I would like Japan to be. More than anything else, I want Japan to be a country in which our young generation and the generation after that and the ones still after that are able to nurture a dream for the future and make their way forward, their eyes earnestly fixed straight ahead. I also wish to make Japan a country that offers and promotes peace and stability. Growth and turbulence are inherent in countries and regions, just as they are unavoidable in the case of human beings. In particular, rapid growth sometimes exposes us to risks that we did not face before. There is a possibility that there will come a time when the public goods of the sky and the sea, space and cyberspace, which are by nature to benefit all people equally, come to be seen as the stage for a zero-sum game. Economic peaks and valleys, changes in political systems, environmental degradation, and the aging of society. These are all great challenges now poised to visit the countries of Asia, which Japan has been working to tackle for some time. These are never-ending issues pertaining to the building of democracy or the rule of law or the legitimacy of the procedures forming the basis for that democracy. But Japan continues to work to tackle these challenges. In the future, by grappling with these challenges together with the countries of ASEAN, Japan and ASEAN will together be able to carve out their future. Japan must regain an economy that's more powerful. Japan will foster in Asia a dynamic society in which all people, regardless of race, gender, differences in age, or disabilities, can pursue their potential. I pledge that by doing so, Japan will carry out its responsibilities to enable ASEAN to attain greater abundance and Asia to become a place where hope shines for the future of its children. ASEAN-Japan in tandem. Let us stride forward together, aiming at still greater heights. Thank you very much.
Yes, please.
Hugues Delcourt, ABN AMRO. I will try to be very short. If you, Excellency, if there was one thing you could do to remedy the deflationary environment, what would it be? And how would you know that you're on the right track? Thank you.
We will take a few questions at the same time, I think, to save time. Yes, please.
Your Excellency, my name is Yvonne. I'm a PhD student at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, NUS. My question is concerning the political development of Japan. I think as a Singaporean, we are very amazed at the fact that your political party has been able to achieve the longevity, the political longevity, and the political renewal that for us is very impressive. Can you elaborate more on this political renewal that your party has gone through in the last couple of years? Thank you very much.
I'll take one more question.
Yeah. Thank you, Prime Minister, for your wonderful lecture. I'm Zheng Yongye from East Asia Institute. My question, I'm glad that you mentioned the China-Japan relation, because this relationship is so vital, not only for China-Japan, but also for the region. But as you mentioned, in the past years, this relationship somehow is in trouble. I went to Okinawa. The taxi driver told me, tourists from China, even Taiwan, stopped coming. Then I went to China. Well, some Japanese firms have moved away. Some are planning to move away. So it's not a good phenomenon. We know when nationalism at both sides is high, it's a difficult job to do to improve the relationship. So my question is, Your Excellency, because now you have a very strong leadership. So how and what Japan can do to improve this relationship under your strong leadership? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we've had three very good questions. The first on the most important priority that Prime Minister Abe sees in countering deflation. The second question on political renewal in Japan. his reflections on political renewal, and the third, the very complex question of the Japan-China relationship.
まずはじめの質問であります。
I would like to respond to the first question. Deflation has persisted for 15 years. It is not a simple task to grow out of deflation. It is not that we can take a single measure and we can overcome the deflation. If that is the case, the deflation would not have been prolonged for 15 years for Japan. So bold fiscal policy and monetary policy, as well as growth strategy, the three-pronged strategies must be advanced. And if one of the three prongs are lacking, three arrows are lacking, we will not be able to achieve progress. With regard to economic growth, we are already seeing signs. And in May of this year, compared to last year's May, there has been increase of employment of 600,000. In terms of a job offer rate, we have been able to regain the level of prior to Lehman shock. So DPJ could not do this in 3 years, and we could do this in the course of a few months. And the employment situation, the employment market is tightening, and the wages will surge, and the demand pooled stable 2% inflation target. It is towards this goal that we are progressing. In terms of expected inflation, this is going up, so we should be steady in continuing on with this path. And turning to the second question of the reform of the LDP, 3 years ago we lost the reign of government, and we try to analyze and draw the lessons from the reasons why we have lost the reign of government, and that is where we have started off our reform. And with regard to the use of the human resources, in the past there existed factions within the LDP, and of the appointments were made on factions in the past LDP, but we shifted this to merit-based appointment and also actively utilizing the female resources. There are three important posts. Three ladies have been appointed to cabinet ministers. This is the first time in the history of LDP, and they do not, neither of them belong to influential factions within the LDP. And with regard to political funding, we had sweeping reforms, and that is the reason why we were able to win a victory in the recent elections. Turning to the relationship between Japan and China, Japan and China is one of the most important bilateral relationships. Japan is supporting and investing to China and earning profits from this. And China, based on Japanese investment, is creating employment and importing semi-finished goods from Japan and processing them and exporting such finished products to the global market. And therefore, this is an inseparable relationship, and we have to have a strategic, mutually beneficial relationship based on common strategic interests. And when I was serving as a Prime Minister in my previous term, the first trip I made overseas was China to restore the relationship. I would like to hold a summit and foreign ministers meeting between Japan and China as promptly as possible, and no preconditions attached to realize these meetings. We are neighbors, and therefore challenges are unavoidable, and that is the reason why the leaders should meet and try to resolve this. The Taiwanese tourists have never been reduced. The Taiwanese, Chinese Taipei tourists have increased in numbers.
We are actually running out of time, but as there's someone wearing a school uniform standing in front, I think I will give her a chance, Prime Minister Abe, for the last question.
Thank you, Prime Minister, for your lecture. I'm Shasta Kaul. I'm a student at ACS International. Sir, as an economics student, we're taught in school that every nation has its economic cycle, which includes a rise and fall, growth and contraction. And some people believe that natural growth is a more permanent solution to an economy's problems. In this regard, sir, what do you think guarantees Abenomics sustainability? Thank you.
You're talking about the business cycle in the economy in your question. For the past 15 or 16 years, Japan has suffered from deflation. And as I mentioned in my speech, there has been downsizing of the economy. And the regions other than Japan have actually increased their monetary base, whereas Japan has maintained a certain stable level. Deflation is a monetary phenomenon, and therefore, in order to change the monetary phenomenon, we want to double the money base, and that is the policies which has been launched by Governor Kuroda of the BOJ. The Japanese central bank, up until now, has not adopted any inflation target, but at this time, we have clearly manifested the BOJ has manifested the inflation target, and your 10 trillion yen supplementary budget has been announced in terms of the fiscal policy. And the business cycle does not improve on its own. The important lies in the fact that we pay the effort, and we have to move always forward towards the reform, and we have to benefit and harness the vitality of the private sector, and the private sector has to have the will to make investments, and we will not be able to overcome competition in the economy, and therefore central bank has to provide the money, and industry has to conduct the necessary investment and improve the productivity, instigate innovation, and to improve the economy. And in that context, the companies will increase the profitability and will pay out the profits in the form of income and wages that will push up consumption, which will lead to investment. So that is a virtuous cycle. This is indeed the first attempt ever made in the world with the three arrows, the three-pronged policies. We are trying to surmount deflation, and we are seeing clear signs of improvements in the real economy, and that is a fact. And we would like to make sure that we go forward with these policies.
I apologize to the others who have been waiting to ask questions, but Prime Minister Abe is on a very tight schedule, and we have to end the proceedings now. May I now call on Mr. Wong Ah-Long, Deputy Chairman of the IC's Board of Trustees, to present a memento to Prime Minister Abe.
The Deputy Chairman of ISIS, Mr. Wong Ah-Long, is presenting to His Excellency Prime Minister Shinzo Abe a pottery piece by Singapore's foremost potter, Iskandar Jalil, entitled Morning Sun from Mount Fuji. It captures Mr. Iskandar's view of the morning sun when he first climbed Mount Fuji in 1973.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I now call the session to a close. Thank you very much, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, for your lecture, which was important both in substance as well as for the spirit and freshness with which you delivered your lecture and the way you've taken the questions. Thank you very much on behalf of ICs as well as all of us who are present here today. Thank you very much.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of the 33rd Singapore lecture. May I ask that you remain in your seats while His Excellency Mr. Shinzo Abe, our Deputy Prime Minister, Shanmugaratnam and the VIP party leave the ballroom.